You're listening to Shoe In, covering the ins and outs of all things footwear, from sneakers to heels, loafers to slippers, and every type of shoe in between. Brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. And now your footwear insiders, Matt Priest and Andy Polk.
Folks, you thought it would never come, but 2021 is right around the corner. Thank goodness.
Please, Lord, bring it.
I remember in March thinking to myself, I wish I had a time warp that would just get us through this straight to the end and get out of my basement
No such
and be
thing.
back in the sunlight. And we're very close now. We're very close. So I'm super excited I'm not a big New Year's Eve person or New Year's or whatever, but I'm ready to get after it on New Year's, to be honest, just to celebrate getting through. I don't know, Matt, what you guys are thinking about, but maybe you're in the same situation where I'm just happy to see 2020 kind of fade a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. It's been a really strange year. There's been so many ups and downs, and there's been things I've enjoyed about it. Being at home, being with my family has been really enjoyable. But you're right, Andy. I think just for our emotional well-being, I think as a society to have that calendar flip over and say 01/01/21, I think will hopefully bring on a collective sigh of relief that we're heading in a better direction than when we started 01/01/20.
Yeah, that's a lot of math, and I don't like that. I'm gonna pivot from that really quickly. But yeah, and I think what I'm hopeful for as we go into the new year is what people have been saying. Let's return to normal, and I've been saying, and I want a better normal than what we've had. I want a better society. I want a more just society as we've gone through all this in 2020. I want better business, better ways of doing business, but also want to make sure that we're taking care of the frontline workers and hospital workers that have been our heroes through all this. I would say if there's a hero of the year, if I put up someone on Time Magazine, the hero of the year would be a janitor at a hospital or at a medical facility, someone that doesn't get all the credit that they need for going in every single day and making sure that the place is clean and secure for healthcare workers to do their jobs on the front line. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, that's a smart choice, Andy.
Yeah.
I totally agree with you.
But also, as we go into this, people know well that at FDRA we try to be clever as we can, sometimes not. But we came up with this whole thing, shoe economy, several years ago, and talking about the shoe economy and just jamming words together. See how clever that is. But it's really about trying to help people understand the marketplace as it is, and then try to get a little bit of a forecast of what's coming. And I think 2021 is looking bright, but there are some blips here and there. And I think folks, as they're starting to plan ahead, even into kind of mid next year and later 2021, the folks who are looking way ahead, as they kind of plan out demand and plan out what their business may look like, we wanted to bring on our chief economist, Gary Rains, to try to help flesh some of this stuff out as Gary, and I'm inviting you here, and you probably had the roughest year ever because we've never had there's no history to what we faced this year in terms of drops really quickly, gains really quickly, both in terms of imports, in terms of sales. I'm sure you're looking at and trying to figure out what's happening. And even, and Gary and I have discussed this too, is the data even correct? Are we collecting good data through these rough times? So you're hitting the firing squad today, my friend.
Pew, pew.
Yeah, absolutely. If all else fails, blame the economist, right?
Well, welcome. That's right. All right. So this episode is really about kind of teeing up what we're seeing in the marketplace right now and trying to forecast a little bit out. Obviously, it's super hard. The crystal balls are more foggy than ever before because of COVID and a number of other things. But Gary, maybe let's just start talking about some of the economic numbers that we're seeing right now and just have a discussion about what's happening more broadly, I guess, to start with the U.S. economy, and then let's go down the funnel back down to footwear towards the end. Yeah.
Sure. Happy to. It reminds me of back in my undergrad days. I think like most of us, while I was taking a stack of classes, regarding economics, I took a token biology class, just kind of, an elective. And little did I think that biology class would have any impact later on in my career when talking about biology and how that relates kind of as an introductory step into virology and epidemiology and that kind of thing. And never would I have thought that I would need to pay close attention to issues like virology and epidemiology and how that would impact economics.
Yeah,
but that's certainly been the case this year. And of course, we saw the other day the Webster's word of the year was pandemic. Really no surprise there. Talking about the economic troubles the pandemic has wrought globally. It's expected that the world economy is going to shrink this year, global economic activity, somewhere around 4.4%, according to the latest numbers from the IMF. And that is really unprecedented. Now, certainly the global economy tends to, truck along and expand a couple percent, sometimes a little more, a little less, one year to the next. But a 4.4% is really unprecedented, not only in its depth, but in its breadth, meaning that we're seeing that decline is really global. It's happening in just about every key market around the world, including the U.S. It's expected that the U.S. economy will contract about the same size, about 4.3% this year. Well, naturally, as goes economic activity, so goes trade. And we're seeing both on the global scale and certainly on the U.S. scale with the contraction in the global economy. We're expecting to see global merchandise trade contract this year, again, at an unprecedented amount. And that's certainly applicable here in the U.S., specific to footwear. So far this year, footwear imports are down some 27% versus the same first 9 months of 2019. And again, we're expecting, I hate to keep using the word over and over, but we're expecting to see this unprecedented decline in footwear imports into the U.S. this year.
Yeah, that's to be expected. And it wasn't to be expected at the start of the year, but based on what we've been through, Gary, it's to be expected now. And I think anecdotally, we've heard, some brands doing positively well and others struggling. I continue to hear people feeling more optimistic about the spring of 2021 and the demand for product there. But this is a new administration coming in. It's a year where typically footwear retracts anyway, historically. How can you even, based on, kind of what Andy was getting at, how can you even forecast out what the new year will look like if the variables are innumerable, have never been seen before, at least in our lifetimes? How do you kind of pull that together? And then the last thing I want to just throw into the mix is the whole, I heard one of the president's former economists, Stephen Moore, say, the stimulus is actually the vaccine. That's what the stimulus is. How do you even throw in this notion of getting the vaccine out there and what it does to the psyche of the American consumer? I just don't know how you even kind of line this all up in your mind to try to provide any kind of forecast.
Yeah, certainly a tough nut to crack in some of the kind of nerdy economic circles that I run around in. The kind of gallows humor going around is this pandemic this year and the prospects for a vaccine, how soon it will come out, how quickly it will be distributed, throws all these macroeconomic models right out the window. So models that have been tweaked over the years to become pretty accurate at forecasting what's around the corner are for naught now, because you've introduced all these new variables this year, issues with the vaccine and the rollout of the vaccine, of course, the pandemic itself, and then, of course, the stimulus measures you talked about. Those three that were really unknowns a year ago at this point, those unaccounted for variables have really thrown all these nice, clean-cut econometric models right out the window.
Gary, let's drill down into the U.S. economy, because I have I think a lot about what's happening in our country around the economy and around people out of work, people who are in work. I look at our brands who are doing really well, where other retailers may be struggling. So there just seems to be this kind of growing divide, and people call it rich versus poor and things like that, economic inequality. And I think some of that is accurate. But as we look at the U.S. economy, are we looking at? I mean, we had talked forever, even on this show in the past, like we were expecting a recession at some point. We weren't expecting this. But it seems like this is the catalyst to reset and retool and optimize things in different ways. But also, when we look at the unemployment rate, I just don't sometimes trust that unemployment rate, because I know some people can't get out and find jobs right now. So when you look at some of the key indicators that the Fed and others look at about the health of the economy, what are we seeing right now, and what do we think going forward?
Sure. And in fact, you really hit on a key one, talking about the unemployment rate. I think it is because we've seen such a pronounced surge, and then in recent months, a fairly quick retrenchment in that unemployment rate. It really makes it a difficult number to gauge with a whole lot of accuracy at all. I think because of that dramatic surge, and then this almost as steep decline in the unemployment rate. Now, still, it is still by all measures well above where it was a year ago at this point, but certainly headed in the right direction as we see more and more people return back to jobs that they had lost maybe earlier this spring. Talking about some broader variables, it's expected. You keep hearing talk about this V-shaped recovery, that
right.
You saw this unprecedented collapse in economic activity in the second quarter, and economic activity in the U.S. is measured on a quarter-over-quarter annualized basis. So, of course, after the collapse in the second quarter, we saw a dramatic surge in economic activity in the third quarter. And you look at it on a graph, it does look like a very sharp, pronounced V shape. But really, looking at the size of the economy now versus, say, a year ago at this point, we're still a much smaller economy, much smaller aggregate economic activity than we were at a year ago at this point. And I think it'll take deep into 2021, likely into 2022, before we really kind of recapture all that lost ground that we were on track to kind of see the economy continue expanding pre-pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about, it was just a couple weeks ago where I read basically where we've climbed back to the bottom of the trench of the 2008-2009 financial crisis.
Yeah.
It goes to show you how deep the ditch was, right? And so as optimistic as it sounds to see these great numbers coming in, we're still in this huge hole. And I'm not trying to be Debbie Downer. I'm actually an optimistic guy by nature, but it just shows you how deep and quickly the bottom dropped out.
Well, there's also, I think there's some other things happening too that are really interesting. And maybe Gary can speak to this, but you've got, more than ever, you have people with a large amount of money in their bank account. I think near historic highs of disposable income, but that's up against the whole idea of, people with mortgages put it off, work with their banks. Those people who, kicked it down the road are starting to say now, well, mortgage payments are coming back. Renters can now start to become evicted, where there was kind of a pause on that if payments weren't made. So all the freeze that we had on debt is now thawing a little bit by a little bit. And there seems to be this big kind of reckoning coming for that disposable income, right, Gary? I mean, that's one thing that I'm really looking at and concerned about is where's that money going to go? Is it going to go back to pay off the debt, or is it going to go to buy a new pair of shoes and be more forward thinking? Because I know too, a lot of people have been paying off credit card debt and everything like that. So maybe there's more free capital in terms of plastic, but I just don't know. Do you have any insights on that?
Yeah, we saw a lot of that with the stimulus measures that the government had rolled out several months ago. There was a pronounced shift, shown that reflected in government data of, like you said, of people paying down debt, not necessarily taking that stimulus money and reinvesting it into the economy, buying stuff, which in turn promotes job growth for sellers of that stuff. But we saw a lot of people really paying down debt. Which is certainly great, for the household's budget, but doesn't do a whole lot to, for the intended action to re-stimulate the economy. Now, looking, as you said, with the prospects now to see these foreclosure evictions spike again, it brings me back to that haves versus have-nots we talked about earlier. Economists get all excited about this thing called a Gini coefficient. It's essentially a ratio kind of measuring the haves versus the have-nots. and this Gini coefficient has gotten more out of whack than it's been in any time in, I think dating back to the Great Depression. A little foreboding sign there, maybe. But that haves versus have-nots, I think, is really the story that the story under the story, behind the pandemic this year is, the haves maybe haven't really felt the full brunt of, the fallout from the pandemic that the have-nots have certainly felt front center in 2020, and I believe likely to continue on into next year. So, while we've seen this, pronounced contraction in economic activity, of course, surge in the unemployment rate, it's really this divergence between, haves and have-nots. For the haves, it's been a minor speed bump, a minor, kind of hiccup on plans. But for the have-nots, it's been absolutely a devastating issue. And I think that will directly impact footwear demand and any shift in what types of footwear sell and when.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Well, if you look at the haves and the have-nots, we've created this economy where the haves have the ability to work from home, digitize everything, connect via Zoom, don't have to go out, don't have to be on the front lines, as Andy talked about, the heroes of the year. Those folks have to go out, they have to be on the front lines. The blue collar workers, the working class have to be out there, and that makes them more susceptible to the virus. You've seen the impact, particularly on the minority community, is higher than it is on more broadly on other communities. And so all those things play into this out of whack system that's going to be a real challenge to try to figure out. And so the other thing I kind of think about is, what will there be pent up demand in 21 that will be realized once things open up? And will that be broad based, or will it just be the haves kind of reasserting themselves and starting to spend more money as things open up, and travel reopens and sporting events open and all the things that we're anticipating? How will that impact the economy? Will we have averted a recession that we thought was coming, right? Will the virus have created this pressure release valve, and then we kind of launch into more prosperity in a general sense? I don't know which way I come down on it, depending on which headline I read, I guess.
Yeah, that's really seems to be the case. And, it's really such a multifaceted issue. Not only stimulus 2.0, you got the issue of the haves versus the have-nots. You've got many people who, are at home, whether it's the kids aren't in school, or maybe the parents, as you said, are able to telecommute and work from home, Zoom, that kind of thing. How many of us in our house now with the spouse and the children are walking around barefoot or in socks? Perhaps there's not a whole lot of wearing down of shoes going on. So I have to think on the one side that there's going to be, once we see this return to school and this return to work, there's going to be that pent up demand for replacement footwear that maybe aren't really a front burner issue now. But at the same time, maybe those footwear aren't getting worn down quite so much because we're not wearing them around the house like we would wear them, out of the house. So I think that's, again, another multifaceted issue that is going to come into play deeper into 2021.
Yeah, I'm concerned about it, to be honest with you. I mean, I'm concerned about, and I think it's really tough for brands and retailers out there you almost have to run dual marketing strategies to reach two different sets of people now. We talked about how you look at talking to people. If you're a big retailer across the country, obviously you talk to people differently in the Southwest than you do in the Northeast, and you have different product. And I think, to be successful going forward, there's going to be two different categories that you really got to start to consider everywhere about people's disposable income and how you, and in some ways it's easier now because you can use the internet and you can target by IP and you can present different coupons and different ways to attract different consumers to spend their money. But it really is, it's going to be a lot harder to get the folks who have been really hit to spend more money on shoes. But at the same time, it's going to be pretty simple, I think, for high-end fashion and obviously like the Nikes are still killing it around comfort and casual and all that stuff. So there's so much churn. I feel like the best way I can describe it is like we had this earthquake, this tectonic plate split, we're still trying to figure out where everything's landing and where our footing is and where the peaks are and where the valleys are. It all kind of changed. We don't really know.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, man. And the haves and have-nots are not, and the earthquake has hit, I guess maybe it's hit everybody, but the response to the earthquake has been different, right? So you have certain states that are more open. So you know what? We are not going to kill small businesses in our states because of this. We're just going to have to navigate through it and keep things open and running as best we can. And others have just shut it down entirely. And so if you talk to family retailers that are more on the shoe side, that are selling the right product mix, that are selling outdoor, athletic, and comfort product, and they're located in states that have less restrictions on being open, they're actually faring pretty well. And so that it also comes down to how your state is reacting to this and what precautions they're putting into place to whether or not you'll be successful. And those are variables you can't really control. I mean, other than at the ballot box, that takes time.
I guess the other big thing I'm thinking about too is we've spent a lot of money on stimulus at the start of this. There's more, and there's hidden pumping that's been going on by the Fed, right, Gary? I mean, we forget you can look at the balance sheet of the U.S. government and realize how much debt we keep adding for a number of reasons over the last 20, 30 years or so. But at some point, interest rates are going to start getting jacked up because the debt's sitting there, right? Like we've done really well to out innovate the debt. So a lot of people are always like, how can we carry so much debt? Well, if your economy is out innovating the debt, then you're okay. But when that starts to fail and you start to decline a bit, the debt starts to catch up to you and starts to eat at you through higher interest rates and inflation. So I guess my concern going forward is like how much more stimulus can we keep putting out there, both in terms of Congress passing something, but the Fed maybe the Fed's making money off all these investments because they've been helping buy more bonds. They've been, in essence, in some ways, putting money into the stock market silently, and we forget about that. But is that a concern, Gary, or am I just too conservative? Am I a deficit hawk too much?
No, I lean more that direction myself. It's my long-term economic bad dream, I think, that I keep coming back to. And if nothing else, thank your great grandkids, because I think they're the one that's going to have to cough up the cash to pay for these checks that the broader economy is writing now. The checks that won't be certainly can't be paid back for decades to come.
I think with Biden selecting Yellen, and I think she'll easily pass the Senate because of her background, and I think a lot of businesses feel very comfortable with her at the helm. My only concern is, and I think the economic team that Biden's putting into place will tackle a lot of this inequality and a lot of wage issues and things like that. So I think that's really something to look forward to in 2021 is the economic policies around working class families. And some of this we saw, Matt and I saw it firsthand when we worked in Congress because our boss represented textile area, and the textile jobs were constantly getting lost. And so how do we retrain the workers and what? So I think that all these conversations are going to come back in vogue about the gig economy and making sure people have opportunities and what that looks like going forward. But, I wonder, I don't know. For Yellen, my only concern is I like the Fed and the Treasury separate. My concern is we're going to start to see more coordination, and maybe we need it for short term, but I don't know what that means long term. I'm just a little concerned about the Fed. I know they're doing all that they need to do to keep it going, but I feel like we need to tamper it down just a tad bit and be a little bit cautious about intertwining institutions like that. Just me personally, just my thought.
No, actually, scoot over and make a little more room on the soapbox. I'd like to join you there, but no, I hear you, and I'm nodding my head the whole time that it does give me a little pause. I don't know the last time that we've had a Fed chair that later went on to become Treasury Secretary in the U.S. So it does give me, while I am a fan of Yellen, it does give me a bit of pause maybe to see that interconnectedness or intertwinement that we haven't had certainly in recent memory. So
yeah.
We'll have to send her, although it probably violates ethics rules. We'll have to send her some Dr. Scholl's gel inserts so we can be gelling with yelling.
Yeah. Oh, there you go.
That's
better gelling than yelling. What we had in the last administration. So that works. Gary, what else out there do you have on your list that we need to cover before we wrap up today?
Oh boy, I tell you, the cup really overfloweth.
Yeah, I know.
We do expect to see this broad-based rebound in 2021, again, both in depth and breadth. We expect to see, as the global economy presumably kind of regains its footing, it's going to be broad-based across all major economies around the world. It's ironic, incidentally, that China, where presumably this pandemic first had begun, actually didn't see a contraction in economic activity in 2020 and is expected to be one of the best faring economies in 2021. Expected to see growth, somewhere north of 7.5% next year. But if we do see whether it's stimulus in different countries or we do see widespread rollout of an effective vaccine, come to fruition, the expectation is that we're going to see this broad-based recovery in economic activity. But again, my concern is that even current numbers expect that the size of the global economy and the U.S. economy at the end of 2021 will not be where it was at the end of 2019 because of the damage wrought this year. Even a rebound next year won't offset the damage that we're seeing going on this year. So it'll be deeper into 2022, like Matt said earlier, before we even catch up to where we were back in 2019.
But I'm looking forward to the March and April sales comps. They're going to be astronomically good, I think. So I'm looking forward to at least getting some positive numbers off some really crappy numbers in the prior year.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe somebody can come up with a whole program around get a shot, get a shoe, right? Bring in your vaccination proof and we'll give you 25% off to welcome you back to the store.
We got to get 2 shots. You can do that twice, right? So.
Oh, boom. There's a double shot to the economy right there. Someone did say, and I thought it was quite genius, for the folks out there who for some reason are anti-vaxxers, I hope they don't take aspirin because, that's the same thing, folks. But the people who don't want to get it, they were talking about as part of the stimulus, paying money to take the vaccine. So if you got your shot, then you would get like $100 or something like that in order to encourage it. But I also think going forward, we're going to see, and I don't know if it'll be shoe retailers, but we've already seen Ticketmaster talk about if you want to go back to a concert venue, you're going to have to have the vaccine. And we've seen it. I've seen it in the UK where they're talking about it for restaurants. If you want to come into the restaurant, you got to have something loaded into an app or something that shows some proof. So the folks out there don't want to get the vaccine. That's your prerogative, is your freedom, I guess. But as part of the social contract, it means that you got to stay in your basement indefinitely because you won't be able to go anywhere and do anything fun. So just throwing that out there. Get your shot.
Mic drop.
Well, at this point, let's bring in Jasmine because
please save us, Jasmine.
I have a couple.
Of all the doom and gloom.
At first I was going to do a fashion segment, but we've taken a turn for several reasons. One, I never thought, grab a shot and grab a shoe would be ever a concept that I would hear before. Two, maybe we need to get you on an infomercial, Andy. I don't know if we have the funds for that, but I could see you doing a 30-second PSA on getting the vaccine. That was pretty interesting.
ShamWow and shoes.
But Gary, at first I was just going to get your opinion on some trends, but I am curious, as our, economics guy, what are you wearing? Like you've always worked from home since I've known you and worked here, but what are you wearing on your feet, during these days? And what's your go-to shoe normally because you work from home?
I am a pretty simple creature. When I am out and about, I am a believer in Echoes, and I've worn Echoes for a couple years, and I really enjoy them. But frankly, right now, when I'm stuck at home, as I said earlier, I'm typically barefoot or in socks.
Socks, okay. Why do you like the Echoes? What about them makes them your go-to shoe?
For me, not just the styling, but the fit. I don't know if it's those European measurements or what, but I'm a kind of a flat-footed kind of guy, and for me at least, those Echoes just have worked for me for a number of years.
Okay, cool.
I will say that it's no shock that there's a barefooted dude from North Carolina. Let's
just hope there's no holes in the socks, okay? No holes in the socks, Gary. Keep your standards a little bit higher. No holes in the socks. What, as you go through the holiday, Gary, is anybody in the household asking for shoes, or are you looking around for anything in particular?
As a matter of fact, I have my heart set on a replacement pair of rainbow sandals that I had previously, and I absolutely wore them flat out. So I'm hoping to find a nice pair under the tree.
Nice. There were, I was looking over Black Friday and Cyber Monday, and I'm just a shopper. I'm not really a buyer, but I'm just always intrigued about what's going up for sale. And there were some really good shoe sales out there. I was looking at Nordstrom stuff, and the product categories were really very interesting because it was, at least on Nordstrom, I thought it was interesting, and Jasmine can talk about this too, but you see more now the fashion casual than even in the past. So like the Cole Haans, I think we're well suited for this environment where you want something comfortable, but you still want something a little bit stylish, even if you're not going out and about that much. But I saw a lot more of that where fashion, and Matt, you and I saw it a couple of fannies ago when we were walking through Michael Kors and some other showrooms where it was just sneakers were popping in places that you would normally see high heels or men's Oxfords or
yeah. Everything has been casualized, and I'm glad you brought up Cole Haan, because Cole Haan is a totally different company from a product offering perspective than it was just a couple of years ago. Just go to their website and you'll see that they have really jumped head first into the casualization trends. And one of the things that we get the benefit of seeing earlier than the average consumer is that we see these things in development because folks are coming to us asking us for classification help. Shameless plug. And so we see some of these things that are under development, and it's really been interesting, particularly to see Cole Haan, because they are making this big pivot. And my hope is that it plays well for them. Yeah.
Jasmine, is that what you're seeing as well?
Yeah. It's been interesting trying to follow the trends, especially the luxury trends over this time, just because it's just interested to see where people want to put their money at. So, yeah.
Right. Interesting indeed, folks. Thank you for listening today to our conversations around the economy and what to expect going forward. And I do think as you're doing your planning heading into 2021, but also looking forward, like obviously, as Gary said, the economy won't get back to where it was for a year, maybe more, depending. But everything now is so, I think, fragmented when we're trying to look at where our marketplace is, and we have to just consider that and sketch that out as we go forward. Fragmented in terms of consumers, both the haves and have-nots that we're looking at more and more, both in terms of product category, both in terms of channel, all these things, and it's almost like we're having to bifurcate our minds when we look at operations and channels and consumers. And if you're not, then you might not be around to see the economy get back to where it was. So this is, it's a tough. It's one of those things where we're having to work harder than ever. But if you're putting in the hard work, then you're getting the reward in. So we're rooting for all our member companies out there, trying to help them as best we can and support them as we get through this. But again, there's brighter days coming. But we just got to keep putting the work in until that time. So as always, shoeandshow.com is our website. You can go back and find our full catalog. All our episodes are on there. Please let us know if you have a topic or ideas of things that we should discuss, product category, anything operationally, anything like that. We're happy to discuss this since this is the Footwear Industries podcast. But for everybody at FTRA, we wish you and yours a happy, healthy holiday season. Be safe out there. And until next time, Shoe In is out.
Shoe In has been brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. For information about FDRA, visit fdra.org.